Biomechanical analysis of basketball free throw. When performing a basketball free throw, there are 5 phases. The preparation phase, where the ball is placed at waist height with both hands on it. The elevation phase begins with shoulder and elbow flexion to position the ball for release. The stability phase, to ensure the ball is shot accurately. The release phase begins with elbow extension and wrist flexion, resulting in ball release. And the follow-through stage, which is sustained wrist flexion. A deterministic model was created in order to make the goal of the skill and its key components clear, with the goal being to increase the probability of success. Distance and height after release were identified as the key components that will have the most influence. The biomechanical principles involved to achieve these are speed of release, force, and backspin. The critical features that influence the biomechanical principles are shooting technique, knee depth, and wrist flick. For the shooter to be successful, proper form and sufficient force must be applied to ensure the ball travels a distance and in the correct direction. The distance and height after release will both heavily influence the success rate of the shooter. Research supported that backspin, speed of release, and force have most importance for determining success. Backspin is used to reduce the motion of the basketball when it bounces off the ring or cause a lower bounce off the backboard. Both allow the basketball to remain close to the rim, ultimately increasing the likelihood of success. When performing a bank shot, increasing the amount of backspin will increase the probability of success, with backspin being more effective when performing a bank shot compared to a swish shot. Speed of release influences the ball's interaction with the backboard and rim, as well as the distance traveled in the air. A study by Sledges and colleagues found that shooters' accuracy may be best understood as being primarily dependent on their ability to control release velocity deviation. There are 2 different ways to score basketball, which means that the athlete must decide prior to shooting the ball so that the sufficient amount of force is applied. The 2 qualitative variables that will be observed is wrist flick and knee depth. Wrist flick refers to the biomechanical principle of backspin and how wrist flexion affects how the ball travels in the air, as well as its interaction with the rim and the backboard. The flick of the wrist allows adequate backspin to be applied onto the ball in order to ensure success if the ball hits the backboard or the rim, as it increases the probability of a bank shot or a capture shot to be successful. Knee depth refers to the biomechanical principle of force and how knee depth will affect the ball velocity, distance, and force reduction by increasing the range of motion. Depth is important in ensuring sufficient force is applied to the basketball, which increases the probability of success. Newton's second law states that any change in force is proportional to a change in mass and/or acceleration. The quantitative variables that are being observed are ball velocity and knee angle. Ball velocity refers to the biomechanical principles of force and speed of release. This will be observed in order to calculate how fast the ball travels and how it affects the ball's interaction with the rim and backboard. Whether the ball needs to be launched at a higher or lower velocity will also be observed. The ball velocity of the participant will be observed and compared to a proficient shooter's ball velocity. Knee angle refers to the biomechanical principle of force. The angle will be measured when the body is lowest and compared to a proficient shooter. The angle's effect on how far the ball travels will also be observed and corrected accordingly. The subject will go through a warm-up which includes form shooting to ensure correct form is used and dynamic stretches. Footage will be captured in slow motion, with one camera filming in the sagittal plane and one in the frontal plane. The cameras will be positioned facing away from the sun to avoid glare. Both cameras will have a view of the net to observe where the ball is placed and whether the shot is successful. Having the backboard and hoop in the frame will allow observation of the effects of wrist flick and knee depth on accuracy and distance. The subject will perform 2 free throws as this is representative of an actual game and shooting variability can be observed. The marks will be placed on the ankle, knee, hip, elbow, shoulder, and wrist to measure the extension of flexion and extension throughout the movement. These markers represent all the joints that are involved when performing a free throw, which will allow all aspects of the movement to be observed so that an informed decision can be made on what to observe. Shot 1 shows 2 snapshots of the ball traveling in the air and falling short. This is due to the shooter not bending his knees enough. In order to fix this, an increase in knee flexion will result in an increase in force reduction, thus increasing the distance the ball travels. This refers to Newton's second law, where an increase in knee flexion will cause an increase in acceleration, which in turn increases force produced. Shot 2 shows the ball hitting the rim and bouncing out of the hoop. To fix this, more backspin needs to be applied so that the ball slows down when it nears the rim. This can be done with a stronger wrist flick. The stronger wrist flick will also cause the ball to have a less harsh bounce off the rim, which keeps it close to the hoop, ultimately increasing the chance for success. Using the tracker software, the angle could be found where the body was in the preparation phase of the movement. As seen in the snapshot, an angle of 136.1 degrees was identified. Research showed that proficient shooters shot at a knee angle of 108.5 degrees, plus or minus 9.8. This means that the shooter needs to reduce flexion of the knee in order to improve performance. Within the preparation phase, shot 2 had a knee angle of 123.5 degrees, which is lower than shot 1. This caused the ball to make the distance. Due to the knee angle of the shooter still being higher than the desired number, the ball travels with too much force to the rim and bounces off it. This is due to increased knee flexion, which ultimately increased force production as there was an increased range of motion. In order to correct this, the shooter must decrease knee flexion in order for the ball to travel to the rim with less force, allowing for a better interaction with the rim. Using tracker software, the time taken to perform the shot as well as the length between the player and the hoop could be found. With the initial displacement being 0, as this movement only looks at the displacement of the ball from the free throw line, a simple calculation could be made to calculate ball velocity. The ball velocity was measured using the displacement divided by time taken for the ball to reach the hoop. As seen by the calculation on the slide, the ball reached a velocity of 6.65 meters per second. Research suggested that an ideal ball velocity of 7.6 meters per second was found to increase the probability of successful shot. To correct this, the shooter must increase the force production, which will increase the ball's velocity and the distance it travels. Using the same calculation and tracker software to find the displacement and time taken for the ball to reach the hoop, a calculation could be made. The calculation showed a velocity of 7.25 meters per second, which is much closer to the ideal release speed that Tran and colleagues have suggested. In shot 2, the ball does travel the sufficient distance due to the ball's velocity being closer to the ideal release speed. To improve the performance of the shot, the shooter can still slightly increase their force reduction, which will also increase the ball's velocity. Other factors such as angle of release and backspin can be utilized in order to increase the probability of success when the ball reaches the rim. In order to fully improve shooter performance, shooting must remain consistent between shots. Bunn and colleagues suggested that those who aren't proficient free throw shooters experience different ball trajectories with each free throw. Whilst the free throws were unsuccessful, both were unsuccessful in a different manner, which is a clear representation of shooting variation. Whilst there is various studies that refer to basketball free throws and optimal conditions to perform them, all studies were either simulations or studies performed on elite athletes. This may cause the data found to be unreliable due to the participant involved having minimal experience shooting a free throw.